Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I will be flipping the May 2024 Spellbinders clubs. These are the 4 cards that I'll be making in this video, and as per usual for my flip videos, it will feature a flat card, a layered card, an interactive card, and a pop-up card. The club kits that I'll be using today are the small die of the month, the large die of the month, the stencil of the month, and the 3D embossing folder. And as well, I also used the freebie that comes if you get the total caboodle, which is all of the club kits. Now, my pop-up card I'm really excited about because this is the first time I've ever made this. I saw it just randomly on a video literally the same day I had to try it for myself. I'll leave a link to the original video where I saw this in the description box below if you want to check out how that creator assembled hers. Now, let's make these. Okay, so as per usual, we're going to start with my flat card. I don't define a flat card as strictly a one-layer card. My definition of a flat card is your card base plus 1 layer of cardstock and then flat embellishments or ephemera on top of that. The whole point of the flat card is so that it's an easy mailer, guaranteed to post or ship for a single stamp. So, I don't want to put a lot of things that will be two-dimensional and cross over into that 1/4 of an inch where it's too thick. Nor do I want it to be too heavy, and sometimes when you're using multiple different layers of heavyweight cardstock, you can get over that 1 ounce limit, and it won't even be like a super thick 1/4 of an inch. It just will be very heavy. So the whole idea behind the flat cards is just to have, nice, easy mailers on hand. What I'm going to start with here is a A2 size panel, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I did use pixie spray on the back of my layered stencil set here, and that gives the back a little bit of a low tackiness to it, so that especially if you're going to use something very liquidy like what I'm doing, it's actually a mix of the Hero Arts shimmer spray, I think it's their metallic spray is what they call theirs, and the Lindy's Gang. I started to mix in some of their magicals to get the color that I wanted. And I really love that both Lindy's Gang and Hero Arts, when they ship their sprays, they don't ship it with the liquid. It's just dry powder. But it's in the larger, the full spray bottle. It's just that when you get it, all you need to do is add some water to it. But the fact that they've shipped it dry as dry powder means that you can actually use it in a multitude of different ways. Like with the magicals, I like to just tap the dry powder onto my panel or onto my glass mat and give it a spritz. You could do what I'm doing today, mix in a little mini mister and put some water in there, just enough for your project, and then spray with it. So lots of different ways that you can kind of use it. You can mix the dry powder in with other mediums as well, like your texture paste, for example, if you just like to use white or light texture paste. But what I was doing as I was creating the panel that I want to use is I was just using extra cardstock to soak in that excess spray, because why let all of that beautiful spray go to waste, right? And these are really lovely. It's hard to show on camera because the color is so light, but there's a really lovely shine and shimmer to them, which is just, when it catches the light, it's just really lovely. It doesn't immediately hit you when you're looking at it straight on. You really have to kind of tilt to see that. Now with my flat cards, because I'm trying to stick to just one additional layer, what I will do so that I still have a little bit of a matte, a little bit of a solid color frame around my stenciled panel, I'm going to just die cut into the center of this. And I die cut it carefully so that it was as centered and as straight as possible. And originally I was actually just going to use the exact same die that I cut out the center of this and use that to cut into my panel. But instead, I actually cut my panel a smidge smaller. So I actually still have a white border of my card base all the way around my stenciled panel. So there's the mint green border, and then I still see a border of white, which is my card base showing through, and then my stenciled panel. And so all of that is still just one layer of cardstock, technically, if you're counting sort of the depth of this card. And so that does reduce the weight of things. So instead of there being a full mint green panel, there's, my stenciled panel is directly on the card base itself. And I am going to bring in this leaf, which is from the large die of the month. It's a really easy, this is kind of cool because I actually made this leaf 2 ways, because it's a 2-layer die set of dies, and I've done light for one and dark on the second layer, and then I reversed it. And no matter, for me, when I look at it, no matter which way I had it, it worked. It looked good. So I don't think there's necessarily a specific shadow piece versus what you can use as the lighter sort of highlight piece. Here's the reverse of that. So I love that, because normally when you're layering die cuts, usually the bottommost layer is going to be your darkest color. And then, like, as you stack on top of it, it tends to be lighter, your lighter pieces. But here, I think you can use it both ways, and it looks just fine. So I'm going to keep the rest of the card really simple. I just have this, I have a stack, as you saw, of sentiments that are either glimmered or better pressed, and I collect all of my extras in that little tray, and when I need a quick sentiment, I just grab for that and look for what I need. And anytime that starts to run a little bit low, I'll just glimmer up like a bunch of different options for sentiments and replenish that stack. Okay, so now on to my layered card, and I will give another close-up look of all of my cards at the end of this video too. Now with the layered card, I'm going to the large die of the month, which has these lovely flamingos. I die cut the body of the flamingos out of the Spellbinders glitter cardstock, which, by the way, it die cuts really, really nicely. I found that with some brands of glitter cardstock, they've got like a plastic layer or something that helps to encapsulate the glitter so that it doesn't shed. But what that means is that when you go to die cut it, your die doesn't actually cut through the plastic, because dies don't really have a super sharp edge. It's just sharp enough to where with enough pressure, it's going to cut through paper really easily, but it's not really sharp enough to cut through plastic. That's why a lot of times it can be difficult to cut through acetate, for example. Sometimes it's manageable to do with enough pressure, but a lot of times that can be a challenge. And for similar reasons, some glitter cardstocks I find very difficult to die cut, but the Spellbinders ones die cut beautifully. One pass through. Granted, I am using my Gemini, so that does tend to have more pressure than your standard manual die cutting machine, but it worked beautifully. And what I love about this set is that you do get a pair of flamingos that they aren't mirrors of each other, so they are different in that sense. But also I love the fact that they are facing each other, because if you want to use 2 of them on the same card, kind of feels like they're interacting with each other a little bit more than if you had 2 that were facing the same way. And as well, I love when, whether it's a stamp or a die set and you've got critters or characters that, multiples of them on a single set. I love that when they have, some that face left and some that face right, because I feel like that gives you a lot more options for how you compose your, scene. Because I like to always have my characters facing the center of the card and not looking off of the card. So if I have the flamingo that's facing towards the left, I would tend to put that more on the right of my card so that it's looking towards the middle of my card. I wouldn't put it on the left of my card and have it look off the card. So the fact that you get both facing different directions means, depending on the composition of your card and where you want to put your focal image, you can choose the right flamingo for the spot. Now, this layered floral set is really cool, and I don't know that I've seen Spellbinders do one exactly like this, but maybe they have and I just haven't seen it. But there's 5 individual petals. I die cut it out of white, and I just did a very light pink inking just to darken the center of the petal. And it might look a little bit strange. There's like a weird kind of blob at the end of these, and it's very oddly shaped, but intentionally so, because that odd shaped center, it's actually the center of the flower, which there's another 2-piece layering set that goes exactly in the center of your flower. But what that allows you to do is, if you position these so that they line up and they match on the outer edge exactly, then you have the exact position that each of these 5 individual petals needs to be sort of attached in order to have a full flower. Now, of course, you can get creative and just kind of position them however you want, and I think it would look really lovely. But if you want to see how they've designed it and how it's supposed to look, what you want to do is stack that that center part so that the outer edge looks is identical and is matched up, and you'll have consistent flowers that always have this shape to them. So I thought that was really cool, that how they designed that and how they made it so that you don't have to guess as to which petal goes where and how to arrange it. But once you've done it the one way as it's been designed, I think you can kind of take liberties and then just start to attach them however you'd like, because that center part's going to get covered up anyways. So you don't really have to worry about that being visible. But it is nice that they've made it really easy. They've sort of taken the guesswork out of it. And so to start my card, now that I've assembled some different elements, I have this panel here that is A2 in size. So this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm using my VersaFine Clair inks to blend 3 different colors of greens to give it a little bit of that sort of rainforest tropical green vibe to it. And I wouldn't normally grab VersaFine Clair for ink blending, but it is a pigment ink. It's a more fast drying pigment ink than, say, your Versacolor inks, which are a nice, almost sort of chalky, pigment ink. Versa Magic is chalky ink, and that blends really beautifully as well. But it just so happened that in the VersaFine Clair inks, there were these 3 greens, which I felt were the colors I was going for. And so that's why I grabbed for these. And I'm just taking my time. I'm going over the different areas multiple times, layering up these 3 greens until I've got enough color there. And then I ran it through the 3D embossing folder, which is really, really lovely. It's got a lot of these sort of tropical foliage. I think they might be those. Are they palm fronds, or I don't know exactly what plant that they're from, but there's those big leaves, and then those leaves along with like these little flowers. So really lovely. So I've got my tray here of a variety of fully assembled flamingos, some additional flowers that I assembled, some of the smaller, more dainty flowers that don't require any assembly. And I just picked out what I thought I would use on this card. And the tricky thing, though, I find with using a 3D embossed panel, part of the lovely thing about a 3D embossing is that you have all of that dimension, and not everything is at the same, raised to the same level. You've got some things that are pushed up further than others, and some areas that are a little bit more shallow. But it does make it a little bit challenging when you start to glue things down onto it. So I don't mind burnishing on top of die cuts that are going over a 3D embossed panel. I just make sure that I'm only burnishing over the actual die cut. So if it happens to flatten out the 3D embossing, that's totally okay, because it's not like you can see it anyways. But with the another thing that I like to use with 3D embossing, embossed panels, is my 3D glue gel. And that's because the 3D glue gel, it can kind of just go wherever it needs to go, right? So if there's some areas, especially here, where I've attached that flower and it's over multiple different layers of die cut elements, and it's on top of the 3D embossed panel. Some parts of it are directly on top of the embossed panel. So the glue gel just helps so that it just can sink into as, far down as it needs. And what I did was I actually added, because you can just squeeze out from the syringe as much or as little as you want. You can create like big blobs of glue or just squeeze out just a little bit, and maybe you're not looking for any dimension, you're just looking for it to really sink into those grooves that the 3D embossing folder put into your panel. But with the flowers, I actually curled up the edges of some of those petals, and I want to hold that dimension. So what I did was, where the petal starts to curve upwards, I actually put a thicker mound of glue. And when that dries, it's going to hold that dimension so that it doesn't flatten out again. Okay, so now onto my interactive card, and I'll be using mostly the small die of the month, which is super cute. It's the small die of the month, but it packs a lot in here because you get 2 tropical birds. You've got this first one that I will assemble as the parrot. And then you also have a toucan, which is really adorable. And then besides that, you've got some foliage, some flowers, and lots of, little elements like that, which I think are really cute. And of course, all of the club kits, I think all the ones I'll be using, at least with this set of cards, they all have that tropical vibe to them, so they're all going to mix and match really well together. And you can see the sort of assortment, the little array of Spellbinders glitter cardstock that I have here. And by the way, this glitter cardstock die cuts beautifully. So you saw me use it for my flamingo. I used that lighter pink for the body of the flamingo. And on my, both of my tropical birds, I actually die cut out of the glitter cardstock, just some portions of the bird. So for the parrot, I've die cut out of glitter cardstock the wings, which has 3 layers to it, and as well the tail feathers. And I just really love these like super bright, colorful colors. And I even used a bit of that blue, the lighter blue, as behind the eyes. So sort of the iris is blue. So my parrot has some lovely blue eyes, glittery blue eyes. And when you're going to attach the sort of the white portion, there are some a deboss outline on the body that gives you sort of that guide as to where to glue that down. Same with the beak. So if you look for that, and that's what will give you that indicator of where to glue. Now for the wing though, there isn't a deboss line for your wing. So you can actually give your parrot some different sort of personality if you want. You can maybe try to make it look like it's a bird in flight by maybe turning up the wing a little bit more. And so there's some different options that you can do there. And even I've stacked the wing so that it's all stacked one on top of the other. But maybe you could even layer them up a little bit differently to have the wing kind of be a little bit more spread out as if it was flying. So you could try that. Maybe even try adding a second set of wings for the wings that would be visible from behind. So I think there's lots of things that you could do there to give it some different movement, some different character. And with the toucan, here's the thing that I noticed. So there's one die that cuts out these stripes. And then there's another die that gives you just sort of the beak part. And I'm gluing onto that layer. But that was totally unnecessary because that matches 100% the base layer. And so you could have just glued, and for the subsequent toucans that I assembled, I just glued those stripe bits directly to the base layer, cutting out that middle section. And just a note, this white piece here, sort of the face of the toucan, it actually tucks under larges that first stripe, my blue stripe on the beak. So just mental note that you want to glue this down first so that it can tuck under the beak area. But there are some deboss lines that show you, there's actually, I look for that little curvature at the bottom where sort of the neck or where the beak meets the body. And so that's what I looked for for placement. And the wing on my toucan, I die cut it out of black glitter cardstock. So even though it's black on black and it might be hard to see the fact that it is glittery, when you tilt it, you'll definitely be able to see it. And I assembled a bunch more of the toucan. And some of them I had the wing upturned a little bit so that it kind of looks like it might be in flight. And so I think it's kind of fun that you can really play with, how you position the wings. And that might actually be suggestive of, a little bit of action with these tropical birds. And because this is true of both the parrot and for the toucan, with the wings on the parrot and the tail feathers on the parrot, as well as the beak of the toucan, there's one die that cuts you all the different pieces. So when I die cut that out, I just used the whole die and I die cut the whole thing. So I'm going to have a lot more different color combinations that I can play with because I have a lot of different extra pieces that can form together for the wings, the tail feathers, and the beak. So you'll see later, I think I made in total like 5 toucans and a couple of the parrots. I can probably make a couple more with the pieces I still have left over. So now with my interactive card, I'm going to start off with this panel that I've just inked up with some blue to be suggestive of sky. I've got this bit of greenery here, which is from the large die of the month, and I'm going to create a wreath out of it. And you can see all of my toucans, the various different color combinations on the beaks. And I'm going to make probably the easiest interactive card you can possibly make. And it's going to be an action wobbler. mechanism. So really, really easy. And that's going to be nice considering the composition for this card. I mean, it's a lot of die cuts and a lot of gluing down. Now, these little thin leafy bits here, if I had thought about it earlier, I think what might have been better would have been to back the cardstock with some double-sided adhesive and then die cut. And then I would have adhesive edge to edge on all of those thin little leaves. But since I didn't think too far in advance to do that, the next best thing is the glue on your hand trick, which I didn't come up with. I think I saw another content creator here on YouTube, but I forget who now. It's been so long. And the nice thing with doing this is you can kind of, tap into, that glue and just tap it off if you get too much onto your die cut. But what's nice is that it allows you to get just the right amount so that when you glue it down, it doesn't, you don't have a lot of excess glue that just squeezes out. And it's a lot faster than trying to get glue onto those thin individual leaves. So the action wobbler is really easy. It does have some adhesive already on it, so you just need to peel away the liner, attach it to your die cut, whatever it is you want to wobble, and then remove the liner from the bottom. I added a little bit of liquid adhesive just to make sure it's very permanent, and then glued it down to the center of my wreath here. Now I've got some leaves that are sticking up and I don't want those to get snagged on anything, so I've just put a little bit of glue on the edge of some scrap paper, and that makes it easy to just kind of get under those loose leaves that were not fully stuck down, and it just helps to get a little bit of glue behind those so that I can really get those well stuck down. And then these little, kind of this little sprig here, this is also from the small die of the month. So what I'm going to do is, I thought maybe adding the second character, but I decided against that. And instead, what I'm going to do is I am going to dot on the wreath some of these little dainty flowers, and one of them comes from the small die of the month, and then the other flowers, I've die cut them both out of a variety of different colors, and so I can't tell exactly which came from where, but one came from the small die of the month and the other came from the large die of the month, but they're not identical. They're slightly different. And so I just die cut them out of several different colors, and in the center, I just put a little Nuvo drop instead of, well, curiously enough, the small die of the month, that flower had a little die cut circle for the center. But the one that came in the large die of the month, it doesn't actually have a center for that flower. But in any case, I didn't use it. I used Nuvo drops because they're just a lot easier, I think, than dealing with those small little circles. So I've got, again, I'm pulling out my 3D glue gel here, and especially on top of that wreath that I created, there's so many different layers of cardstock underneath there. So the glue gel is a really good candidate for when you're trying to attach something onto different depths, underneath. That way the glue can just kind of just give it a slight, tap down, so that it makes good contact and it kind of goes all the way as far down as it needs to go. But don't push down really hard, because all of that glue is just going to ooze out. And certainly you don't need to burnish for the same reason. So what I would do is give it maybe about 24 hours to really, really dry hard. And then you don't have to worry about putting anything on top of this. But until it's had a good time to dry, it'll probably be fairly firm in a couple hours. But I would bet that even after a couple hours, if you were to put something like super heavy, like a thick book on top of it, it would still probably flatten a little bit. And the whole idea behind using this thick glue is to have that dimension. And so that's how I'm gonna attach all of these little flowers here. And it's kind of fun to have like such a simple interactive mechanism, and that way you can really have fun with the decorating and all of the die cutting that goes into a card like this to really fill it out, make it look really lush. It does require quite a bit of die cutting. Okay, so now onto my pop-up card. I don't even know what this mechanism is called. I came across a video, as I mentioned, and I'm not making it the way that creator made hers. I decided to use dies, but I encourage you to check out her video if you'd like to see how she made hers. So I've got three size circles. The largest one is 4 1/4, the next is 3 inches, and the smallest is 1 3/4. The small one, here's how it compares to the square I'm using. It needs to be just the 4 edges of your square need to be able to fit inside of the smallest circle that you use. And that smallest circle, I just used it to die cut out of the center of the 2 larger circles, giving me those 2 donut pieces. And I need 1 square, a couple of strips that I will glue and stack together to create a pull tab. And then you'll need another few sort of strips as well. And I'll get to that when we get to that point. Now with the square here, I am going to score an X connecting the opposite corners, and then flip to the back side and score in half, just on, one edge. And then if you take all of your score lines and fold them as mountain folds, so your X will both fold from one direction, and then the straight line will fold from the other. So if my X, they are mountain folds, then the straight line will be a valley fold, and vice versa. And when you do that, it's going to collapse down into this triangle. And what I'm going to do, because there's a lot of bulkiness at the tip here, I'm just going to cut off about 1/4 inch. You don't have to measure it. It's the only reason to do it is just to remove the bulk of that cardstock in the center there. And once that's done, I'll set that aside. This is just a bit of scrap that is longer than what I need. So what I'm going to do is score 3/4 inch from one edge, and then I will measure this to fit. And in total, what it ends up being, this piece for this size card, which will be a 6x6 card, it ends up being 4 1/4 inches wide by 1 inch tall. I didn't know that going on because this is literally the first time I'm making this card, and I'm not following the directions from the original video where I saw this. If you want to, she does it completely differently in the sense that she actually draws out her mechanism and makes it as a single piece. And she mentioned in the video that she does have, I think, a digital that you can download if you want to just print and then cut on the line. But when I looked at how this all works, it just looked like a few basic shapes that you can just glue together. And so that's how I've interpreted how to assemble this. So I've got the larger circle here, and what I've done is I've positioned the circle where I want it to be on the inside of my card. And then I want to attach this square to the end of this pull tab. And I gave myself a pencil mark where the edge of the square will end up getting attached. And then I have, and that's where I will score. So where the edge of my square gets attached to the pull tab, I am going to give myself a score line. So what this piece ends up being, I mentioned earlier, is 4 1/4 wide by about 1 inch tall. And then I scored at 3/4 of an inch and at 4 1/8 of an inch. And so that gives you a glue tab on the left edge that's 3/4 of an inch, and then you have a glue tab on the opposite side that is 3/8 of an inch, and that's what I will glue to my square. So once this gets glued down, then we basically have the main mechanism piece for this pop-up card. And again, the original video where I saw this, I literally saw this and then made it the same day. So this is my first time making it. Maybe there's obviously different ways that you can put this together. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. I've never seen this mechanism before. So, and as I mentioned, I don't even know the name of it, but it's really, really fabulous how she put hers together. So definitely check that out if you want to see another way of doing this. But I'm gonna just trim off these edges here because and you know, it doesn't even really matter that you trim these down because you're not gonna see them anyways, but this is just a little bit of the pull tab that's hanging off the edge of my square here, but it really doesn't matter because none of that's going to be visible at the end of the day. So then what I'm gonna do is anytime I'm making anything that is a sort of a kinetic card where there's a lot of movement, I like to dry fit things. So I just use my removable tape and I'm temporarily taping down where these would normally get glued down, just to make sure that everything still folds down flat. And you can kind of see some of these folds, they need some encouragement in order to start to collapse down. So the more you open and close a pop-up card, the more that cardstock will be trained to kind of go where it needs to go and fold down. But you can see how this all collapses down and folds completely flat. Really, really fun. So cool. And so I've got that part. And now the cool part about this is that these circles that I have, or these donut shapes that I have here, they will actually spin and turn as you open and close this. So one of the circles will go clockwise and the other circle will go counterclockwise because of where I'm attaching this right here. This is just a bit of scrap cardstock that's about 1/4 of an inch wide and an indeterminate length. It's just whatever it needs to be. And I'm going to attach one piece to my square in the bottom left corner. Make sure that when you attach this, it doesn't cross over any of those folds. You don't want it to go over overlap any of the folds because otherwise it's not going to fold down nice and flat anymore. So it's a little bit similar to like a wiper mechanism because it's being attached on a piece that's kind of angled a little bit. And so I'm going to just, again, dry fit the smaller ring on top. I'm going to position the smaller ring so that because we use the same size die, circle die, to cut out the center, I'm going to line this up so that that is completely lined up with the outer ring. And then I'm going to glue that little 1/4-inch tab onto my square. Again, making sure to not cross over any of those score lines. And when you have this positioned, it's going to take a little bit of encouragement to have it really kind of fold down nicely. And I would definitely recommend using a liquid adhesive so that you can move things around a little bit. But you also sort of have to be patient because your liquid adhesive isn't going to be immediately well, firmly stuck down. So when you start moving it, and if it hasn't dried enough yet, then it's going to start to, pop off. So just make sure to be a little bit patient, give it some time to dry. And I always like to test my mechanism, really make sure that it can open and close nice and smoothly. And you can see it does take a little bit of persuasion. So what I would recommend is for the mechanism pieces, use a lighter weight cardstock, say like 65 pound, because of the folds. On a thinner cardstock, it's going to bend a lot more easily. And if you use something thicker, like 100 pound, it's not going to fold down as easily. And so your mechanism might not glide as smoothly. So for the square piece, for example, I would use 60 pound there. For the pull tab, I would use 60 pound, but I am actually going to reinforce this just on the section that's straight, not where it's folded. That way, the folded part is still just a single layer of cardstock and can fold and bend really easily. But the middle portion is going to be nice and sturdy, nice and strong. And so I end up adding 3 layers of white cardstock, and then for my final card, I added a layer of green cardstock on top of that, just because I felt like it would match my background a little bit better and be less conspicuous. So that was more for aesthetics, but it just helps to make this nice and substantial, makes it nice and sturdy, so that when you open the card and it pulls everything open and moves everything, it's nice and strong. Okay, so the other thing that I did, just to off camera get this card going, is I did use the stencil again, and I stenciled the front of the card. I like to keep the fronts of my card pretty simple, because I feel like a lot of the fun's going to be on the inside, and more likely than not, maybe even displayed completely open. And so you may not even really see the outside of the card much once the recipient has opened it. So I don't like to go to like a lot of work, but these flowers, these leaves, they're so pretty. And so even keeping it simple, I still think it's really, really lovely. So I've got just a little bit of a cluster in this one corner here. And I do like to decorate the outside first, because when the mechanism gets glued into the middle or the inside of the card, it's going to be a little bit harder to really like burnish things and really get them well stuck down. So I like to decorate the front of my card first, even though I like to figure out what's happening on the inside first, but I don't actually glue it in until I've got the front of my card decorated. And once I get some of these leaves down, again, I'm going to use some 3D glue gel for the flower. And I always use Kalau. I don't know if there are other brands that make this type of glue, but I do leave it in my standard supply list because I use it so often. And what I do is I kind of look at the flower from the edges, and I just make sure that I've got enough glue gel there to bridge the gap of where my die cut, where my cardstock is, and where the card base under it is, so that it's got enough glue to kind of stick down to the card base, and then it'll hold that dimension. Now, you definitely want, if you're using 3D glue gel, like I mentioned, within a couple hours, it's going to be firm. I wouldn't be pushing on it or leaving anything heavy on it, but you do want to give it a little bit of time to firm up before you start attaching things on the inside, because you're going to be folding, opening and closing this pretty often. Now, with my mechanism here, I've got the that 3/4 of an inch tab that will get glued to the front, the left side, and you want to make sure that you're not, crossing over the center score line. And then on way opposite end, fold this back just so that that square folds down on itself completely. And then that gives you a really clear idea for where you put glue, because you only need to put glue on this little trapezoid piece here, just this little area right here. And so when you fold it down completely flat, that's all you can see of that square. So that helps you to see it, but open that square up completely and then glue it down. So when you glue this piece down, it should, you kind of stretch out completely flat when it's open. And give it a really good burnish. Make sure that it's had enough time to grab, enough time to dry enough so that it's not going to budge on you before you start to like open and close it. So that's why I like to use the temporary tape to test my mechanism, because I know that that's going to be the right spot. So I can be patient and just give it the time that it needs to dry completely. Okay, so now to attach our donut pieces, and I was using white ones as just like a template to figure out where to put my little extra little stands here, those thin 1/4 of an inch strips. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I glue down the larger of the circles, when it's completely closed, I want to make sure that you don't see that circle. And that's why I was attaching this basically when it was closed as much as possible. And so now that I've got that temporarily taped down, it seems to move nice and smoothly. I'm going to give myself some pencil marks so I know where to position that and where to put glue when I go to glue down that darker outer ring. And I did actually, glue or 3D emboss these circle pieces, so that way they have a little bit of that leafy texture to them. But in any case, it just gives you more visual interest and texture. And so I'm trying to like do a little bit of a dry run with the smaller circle, but sometimes it helps to just start gluing things down so you have some things that are permanently attached, and then you can work on sort of dry fitting the next bit. So with this, you want to attach it to the bottom sort of stand, the little wiper stand, but you want to make sure that the top wiper stand is on top of that outer ring so that we can glue the smaller ring to that, because the smaller ring is going to be glued just to that little wiper mechanism. And then I've also got this another little bit of scrap paper here that is about 3/8 of an inch tall and an indeterminate length. I'm going to actually trim this down to fit because it was actually getting caught in some of the other moving pieces. But that's why it's nicer to just have it be a little bit longer than what I think I'll need. And then I'll snip it down. But the reason why we need that is so that I can cover up that all of the mechanism in the center of these circles. And so that little extra strip, that 3/8 of an inch tall strip, I glued that to the outer ring. So that's glued to the outer ring. And then I'm going to glue my inner ring to that little wiper mechanism, lining up the inside circle so everything is nice and flush. And when it moves, it's going to move however it needs to move. So don't worry about that. It's not going to rotate and stay centered in place. But when it's fully open, everything should line up completely. And so as I was turning it, that's when I noticed this was too long and it was getting caught in some of my other mechanism pieces. So I just snipped it down. Because you only need enough to glue this, which is a slightly larger circle than the 1 3/4 of an inch aperture that I cut out of those two larger circles. That's just so that I can cover up all of the internal workings of this mechanism. And I'm actually using a little bit of just low profile foam on this to attach it, and that just gives it a little bit of space so that it's going to be not, hopefully it doesn't like get caught on anything, just that little bit of space. So there's our mechanism pretty much complete. It's all hidden. Everything moves nicely. Now, here's something that I learned after the fact as I was playing with this mechanism more. Those little wiper strips, that 1/4 of an inch strip that our two rings, those two donut rings are attached to, I originally cut those out of 60 pound cover weight cardstock. I would go stronger. I would go heavier weight on those pieces. I ended up, after the fact, off camera, to make this actually operate more smoothly, I cut a second layer of those little strips. These are the little strips that my donut rings are attached to. I doubled those up. And that helped a lot. That helped to have everything move a lot more smoothly. So now I've got some strong acetate. And these, I guess this could technically be just thick cardstock because it does get covered completely. But I used acetate just on the off chance that just to make these look like the birds are flying. And so I've attached the acetate stand to the back of this one. My toucan is attached to the outer ring. And the toucan itself, initially, I only glued it down to the acetate. But I did eventually glue its feet and wing down to the that outer ring itself. So you can glue things to the outer ring. Just make sure that when you're gluing something to it, you're only gluing to that ring because it needs to move. And same with my parrot here. I've got some clear acetate that's glued only to the lighter, that inner ring. And I will glue my parrot to the acetate so that it can move with the ring that it's attached to. Now, when this is open, you basically want to position your elements, whatever you want to move, you want to position them in their final, I guess, however you want to compose your scene. You want to position them so that they are in their final positions. And they're going to be moving towards each other. So the toucan is going to rotate clockwise as you open, and the parrot will rotate counterclockwise as you open. So the smaller ring goes counterclockwise, the outer ring goes clockwise. And, but you want to definitely test these so that when it's open, it's where you want your final scene, however you want your final scene composed. But when it's closed, you do want to make sure that everything still fits inside your card and nothing is sort of peeking out from the edge of the card. And I thought it would be nice to add some of these extra little flowers because I had so many left over, and it's just like a nice little extra pop of color. But be careful with this. I had to move this one flower multiple different times, and initially I had it stuck to the inner ring and it was getting in the way. So then I had to move it to the outer ring. So just be careful to always be opening and closing, and to use liquid adhesive because that's going to give you the time to actually move things around and make those adjustments if you need. Okay, so here's a final look at all 4 cards that I made. This is my flat card, which features the stencil of the month, and the leaf is from the large die of the month. Here is my layered card. This features the 3D embossing folder, the flamingos from the large die of the month, as are all of the floral elements, and the sentiment is from the free bonus item that you get if you get the total caboodle, which is all of the club kits at the best price. And next is my interactive card. This is a wobbler card, and the toucan is from the small die of the month. The foliage is a mix of small die and large die, as are the flowers. They are also a mix of small and large die of the month. And the better pressed sentiment is also from that freebie that you get, which happens to have a lot of really cool sentiments that go with the whole tropical vibe of this month's clubs. Now, this is my pop-up card, which features the stencil of the month. The large flower on the outside is from the large die of the month, as are the small flowers too, I think. But our tropical birds are from the small die of the month, and the sentiments are actually from various different Spellbinders stamp and die sets. So really, really fun. I am definitely going to do another video tutorial just of this mechanism, and because I just think it's really cool. I need to learn what it's actually called, but I definitely want to make more of those. That it was a lot of fun to create that, and be sure to check out the original video that inspired that card in the description box below. Thanks so much, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.